All righty. Let's hit it and we'll go. Well, welcome to the Baskipedia Podcast. Tonight we have live Coach Brent Tipton from Guam National Team. Hey, Coach, how's things going there on Wednesday afternoon in Guam?
We're doing well. It's the beautiful Wednesday afternoon here. Sun's out, breeze is out. We're thankful for a beautiful day.
Tonight we have live Coach Brent Tipton from Guam. All right, here we go. It's giving me the feedback again. There we go. Now I won't have that issue. Still some technical difficulties since going to live, but we're good, Coach. So you've been coaching for a while there overseas. You're from the States. It's Missouri, right? Is where you're originally from?
Yes.
So how did you get your start in coaching, Coach?
Well, I graduated from college. I played small Division III basketball. I moved out to Guam in 2008 and just wanted to stay connected to the game. So I was asking around, where's the best basketball? They mentioned where the national team was playing and practicing. So I just started practicing with the national team. So I did that as a kind of a domestic player. I didn't meet FIBA requirements. And so I just played locally with them. We took a couple of trips to the Philippines. I did that for about 3 years, and then I pulled my hamstring twice. And then Guam Basketball Federation asked me if I wanted to coach. And so that was in 2012. I coached the under-17 national team in the Micronesia Championships in Saipan. And then about 6 months later, I took the under-19 national team to Australia for the Oceania Championships, and we actually finished fourth. And so since those two windows with those teams, I've been coaching in different capacities with the Guam Basketball Federation. In 2013, I had the opportunity to coach Guam's senior women's national team for the East Asian Games in China. And then from there, just working with either an under-18 team, an under-17 team, or an under-16 team. And then in the last year, just in our FIBA Asia Cup preparation in those three windows, assisting with the Guam senior men's national team as we're in our FIBA windows for the Asia Cup.
That's good. That's awesome, Coach. Could you tell us, since you've been coaching for a while, who are some of the influences that have helped form your coaching philosophy?
You know, it's been a mixture of coaches, and it's actually been a mixture of books, just through reading, material. I think the two people who had been the biggest impactor of my coaching philosophy are people I've never met, but a lot of people I've listened after. And those two guys are Alan Keene of Great Britain and then Mark Bennett. And their biggest thing that they're talking about is having a needs-based coaching philosophy, as opposed to having either a coach-centered philosophy or an athlete-centered philosophy. So basically a coach-centered philosophy is either my way or the highway. And then having a needs-based coaching philosophy is really just focusing on what specific need does a player need at the time in practice or in a game. And so one of the biggest things with having a needs-based centered coaching philosophy is understanding that when we're coaching and we're correcting players, we're not criticizing them. So a phrase that we say is correction isn't criticism. And then we kind of form that to where coaching isn't criticism. And so we really feel like that goes into I feel like that goes into a needs-based coaching philosophy, and just really understanding players. Voltaire said that it's impossible to hate someone if you understand them. So understanding our players is huge in our coaching philosophy. And then two books that have been really impactful to me. The first one is Growth Mindset, The New Psychology of Success by Carol Dweck. which has become really popular in the last decade, just working between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And then a book that maybe is less known in the coaching circle, it's actually a baseball coaching book, but it is Coaching the Mental Game by H.A. Dorfman. And really the biggest takeaway in the philosophy in this book was how to establish yourself as a coach with positional power versus personal power. So basically positional power is a coach's centered mind, or coaches centered philosophy, which is my way or the highway. Whereas personal power, we're more or less working through our personal relationships with players and making sure that we're hitting the players' needs personally, as opposed to through our position. So just philosophically, how my coaching philosophy has grown is I feel like using personal power is the best way to communicate, and then using more questions in our coaching as opposed to telling players what to do, as opposed to just asking them questions. And so within this, with our personal power, and what I've tried to develop is teach rather than expect performance from our players, and then motivate and help rather than manipulating players. And so trying to avoid controlling behaviors and understanding that if a player does something well, praise them. If they do something incorrect, then that's our opportunity to come in and to coach them. And so I really feel like coaching philosophy kind of boils down to, especially at the youth level, how are we viewing players' mistakes, and then coaching them in an error-positive learning environment, understanding that their errors can be positively used so that players can learn from their mistakes, and then really hoping that we can help players through their mistakes by judging their decisions as players independent of their outcome. And so kind of in a long-winded answer, those are really the three things that have really influenced my coaching philosophy over the last couple of years.
Well, with COVID and what's going on in the world, a bunch of sharing started in about late March, early April, and you've been on the Zoom trail.
Yes.
You've been doing your share of clinics. What have you learned the most during some of these clinics? Have you taken quite a bit, or is it just reaffirmed what you do, or is there a lot that you're going to maybe take back to your Guam team?
Yes, definitely, man. Just the amount of sharing that has gone on, and the personal, on phone calls with guys who I would never think that they would actually want to talk, whatever level they're at, just the amount of sharing has been tremendous. And so I really dove into three topics during the quarantine and then the lockdown here on Guam. The first topic I really dove into was teaching the pick and roll, mostly the mid pick and roll. I gave a clinic through FIBA Oceania on this, just for the federations in FIBA Oceania. And then from there, got other opportunities to present that presentation. And then the second topic that I dove into was offensively, there's this huge push on teaching dominoes and how to gain this offensive advantage through attacking closeouts, through playing with space. And I wanted to know how to stop that. And so the second topic that I studied was how to stop dominoes by controlling penetration. So I got to do another clinic on that with FIBA Oceania and with other groups. And then the third and last topic that I've really just dove into was teaching transition. And then I know we're going to talk about this later on tonight, but just how to teach the two-side transition, how to play unscripted in transition, and really just gaining what other people's perspective and other coaches' perspective are on this topic.
For you guys that are just joining us right now, we got Coach Brent Tipton live on YouTube. So thank you for joining us. So Coach, you've been doing FIBA. I'm a high school coach here in the States. The main difference in my eyes is 24-second shot clock compared to either not having one, or if you do have one, which I do in California, I have a 35-second shot clock. So what are some of the other differences of FIBA compared to high school? I mean, is your FIBA rules that you coach at with your 17U team the same as the team that qualifies for the Olympics plays under? Same rules?
That's correct. Yeah. So we do play FIBA rules. I believe that the FIBA game and the way it's played is the only way it should be played. just through the way, obviously you said the shot clock is a huge proponent and a huge difference between the American game and the international game. For instance, we had 10-minute quarters as opposed to 8-minute quarters. So in the last Oceania Championships, during our qualifying rounds, we were playing in about 2.5 to 3-minute spurts. And so with a longer game, we're getting more opportunity for players to play, just because, in the high school game, the pace isn't as much. And so you can kind of take maybe a possession off or not play, I guess, at the same pace as you have to play in FIBA. Strategically through coaching, we only have 2 timeouts in the first half. And we have a total of 5 timeouts that we get for the whole game. So we can only use 2 timeouts. If you don't use it, you lose it. And then we get 3 timeouts in the second half. And a player can't call that timeout on the floor. A coach can't call that timeout on the floor. It comes from the table. You have to request it from the table, and it has to come on a dead ball. And so the reason why we tried to play in 2.5 to 3-minute spurts was sometimes because of the pace of play and no stoppage in play, our guys would be sitting at the table, for could be 2 minutes at a time. So you can't get players in as quickly as you would like. And then we have a 14-second shot clock on the reset. So if there's a kickball or if there's an offensive rebound, then we only have 14 seconds to get back into offense, or we only have 14 seconds to defend. So that kind of comes in with, having a strategy of how you're going to attack off of an offensive rebound, which we're obviously going to try and put it right back up, or we're going to get a kick out 3 immediately. And if we can't get a kick out 3, then we're reversing the ball to the opposite side and then trying to attack closeouts. And then a couple of rules that we have that the American game doesn't. We have a 0 step, so we can gather and then into a 1-2. And then in the last 2 minutes, you can advance the ball off of a timeout, but you can't take a timeout if you are setting up your defense. So if you're the defensive team, you can't call a timeout and request a timeout. Only the offensive team can request that timeout. So strategically makes you a better coach. And then just skills and decision and pace of play, I feel like it makes players better.
So you get to, on timeouts, late game strategies, do you get to advance it?
Under 2 minutes of the fourth quarter, yes.
Okay. So side out of bounds plays and stuff like that, and the NBA influence and all that stuff helps. 8 seconds to get across midcourt, or?
Right. Yes, 8 seconds to get across midcourt, which puts, we offensively, we try to play first 8, last 8. So we're trying to score either the first 8 seconds or the last 8 seconds. But even defensively, whether you're going to trap or not, just keeping the ball in the back court, pressuring full court, not to steal, but just more to contain becomes more of a strategy. So now when teams cross half court, they got about 17 seconds to execute, and it just plays a good advantage for defensively for us as well. That's a strategy that we try to take.
Okay, so that leads me into my next question with the 24-second shot clock. Is that probably because FIBA's known for the ball screen? European basketball, overseas basketball is known as the ball screen, like capital of the world. I mean, obviously here in the States, it's the main form of offense, I would say, in the NBA. But do you think because you have the 24-second shot clock is the main reason?
It's a big reason. And we use the pick and roll differently than I would say stateside or American usage. I know we talked earlier about, the continuity ball screen, how, a lot of times teams are trying to get to the third side on continuity ball screen. We don't have the time to get to the third side with a 24-second shot clock. And if we're playing, with a reset of the shot clock at 14, we got to find advantage early. So we don't use the pick and roll necessarily to create a shot or to get a shot. We use the pick and roll to create an advantage. So a lot of times coming down, the first offensive action that we get into, whether that's a pick and roll, a get, a short route pin down, a DHO, trying to find some type of advantage. It usually doesn't score, but we're trying to hunt the second and third offensive advantage that's created by an offensive action to score. So we're trying to get teams to guard 3 or 4 different offensive actions that lead into a pick and roll. Maybe that's a DHO into a pick and roll, a mash screen into a pick and roll, maybe some type of false motion into a pick and roll, just so that we can gain that advantage. And the pick and roll is one of those triggers that we're going to use to seek offensive advantage.
Okay. So, I mean, you're the head coach of the 17U team, and you're the assistant coach of the national team. But how early do you guys start with your programs of starting to implement the ball screen concepts? Is it right when they start playing at 8, 9, 10, or do you guys wait?
That's a great question. We do wait. A lot of the world, or a lot of Europe, I wouldn't say world, but a lot of European countries, they make it so you can't play pick and roll, sometimes under 14. I don't believe it's under 16 in a lot of countries, but under 14 seems to be what a lot of countries in Europe are letting teams play in pick and roll. So under 8, under 10, under 12, they want to have dynamic one-on-one, to where they're teaching players how to guard one-on-one, and then how to attack one-on-one, and then to play in space. And then we use as well, creating advantages through cutting, through spacing. And then once they get to about under 12, we're teaching them through gets. And that's the first introductory offensive advantage situation that leads into a pick and roll. So in fact, we have a clinic this weekend, a national clinic for our federation, and we're actually introducing gets, not pick and roll, but introducing gets. So we like gets because it builds a dynamic one-on-one on the reception back on the receiver, and then we like it because it puts kids who are maybe taller, who get stuck in the post. We like it because it gives them some type of guard development. And so gets are an easy way to create, like I said, create that dynamic one-on-one, and can give guards an opportunity to play on the perimeter as a guard if they keep it. And then another opportunity to play cat and mouse, which can lead into pick and roll play.
For people that aren't familiar with FIBA, I've been starting to study it. Been blessed to get synergy, so I've been watching a lot of FIBA basketball. So I'm gonna pick your brain a little bit about who to study on the ball screen side of things. I mean, I know some top coaches have come to the NBA, like Ettore Messina for the Spurs. Who are some of the people that you study, Coach, to help you with your ball screen concepts?
I think the biggest teacher, and conceptually, I just love what he does. Liam Flynn of Hopewell Jerusalem, him and Ryan Pannoni, who is also an assistant coach with Hopewell Jerusalem, I think 2 years. He's now in the G League with Coach Odesh. They just conceptually, I mean, they're running pick and roll. They try to run the most pick and rolls in the game. They're a 3-out, 2-in. Sometimes they morph it 4-out, 1-in. But Liam Flynn has been personally a great help to me. Just discussing this, whether it's on personal call or giving me information to study. I think one of the best teachers of the pick and roll and a coach that people can check out is Peter Lonergan of Basketball Australia. He's the high performance coach developer. He has some great stuff on two-way teaching, the pick and roll. Anyway, just two-way teaching in general. But he does a great job with, teaching it, breaking it down. And then Alex Sarama, now with Basketball Immersion, previously with the Elite Athletes, just does a great job with putting constraints in that lead to dominoes or lead to offensive advantage, positional advantage. He does a great job with breaking it down, giving players decisions. And I'd say that these 4 guys would be, if you were to study them, I think that your understanding of the game would just skyrocket. And I would highly recommend any of those 4 guys.
Good stuff. I mean, I've had a saying for the last couple of years that I've kind of adopted with my offensive philosophy, that if your offense does not create long closeouts, I don't care if you're running flex, continuity ball screen, dribble drive, read and react, flow, whatever you're running, then you have crap offense. Because that's the way the game, I think the game's played now, 3-point line and rim. There isn't,
right.
A lot of people's philosophy is no mid-range.
Right. And we, you know, the mid range. I think that a lot of times we see analytics for the highest level, and we do think that it applies to, for instance, me at the under 17 level. We still do play in the mid range. You know, when we get to the bottom of a shot clock, or we have a short shot clock, sometimes we do have to get a mid range shot, and so we kind of give the green light under 6 seconds. If we can't get it, our goal in offense is to either get to the rim or paint. We say paint to great, and then we're trying to just generate stationary catch and shoot shots from the three. And then just like you said, we're trying to create these long closeouts. And then we feel that if we create these long closeouts, then we gain positional advantage to eventually create a 2-on-1 advantage. And then our offense is just generated to hunt out these 2-on-1 opportunities by attacking those long closeouts. So yeah, I agree with you 100% on that.
I want to talk about the European model of basketball compared to the US model. I had another person on a podcast, and we kind of did a little NBA chat about, if you took a player, who would you, like in the NBA right now, who would you start your franchise around? And a lot of people would say Giannis. And I picked Luka Doncic. Luka, I mean, I'm drawing a blank. Is the guy even 20 years old?
I think he may be 20 this year, maybe 21.
Yeah. I mean, and his body type is really good. He's bigger. But he came in at 18 and he was a professional NBA player right away. Giannis was 7 points a game. Giannis started his career, but the difference is the way you guys teach the game is it's academies and clubs, and the training starts at, I mean, Luka was a professional, I believe, at age 16 or 15. Is that, I mean, and here in America, you have your high school teams and you have AAU basketball, where a lot of it is we practice once or twice and they're playing a bunch of games on the weekends. Can you share with us kind of what you guys do, or the model, like X number of practices to games? Is it, I mean, you were here, so you kind of know, which one do you prefer?
Development over games. European basketball is, you just look at some countries. Well, let's just take Lithuania, for example, a population of, I think, 3 million, maybe 6 million between there. And they're competing with, the largest population countries in the world. I was in Lithuania in 2015 with the first stage of the FECC. So they had people come in from the federation and broke down what they do on a weekly basis in their clubs, and how they do their talent identification. So the biggest thing for them is they're in the practice court 5 days a week, and then they're playing one game on the weekend. And so all of their focus for their youth players is skill development, decision-making, tactical decision-making, and then they incorporate that into their one game of the week. And so I think that, athletically, an American player is always going to be superior. And the reasons why is European countries are still doing a lot better job at adopting sport performance. But once they catch up in the sport performance realm, then you're going to see tactical decision-making and skill development take over. And I just think that we're less than a decade out from that happening. But then you see the American model is, I haven't been in the States for 12 years, so I can't say, for sure. But when I'm on Twitter and, you read these 10 games in one weekend, and then, like you said, there's one practice maybe once every 2 weeks or once every week. The game should be not the development, but it should test what you're developing. And then the game, or the practice environment, should be where that player is really, put into decision-making opportunities with the skill development, just to enhance the overall player development.
I want to discuss how long does it the learning curve for ball screens. I've never really done too much ball screen in high school because I think you need to use them to gain an advantage. And a lot of people don't realize that LeBron is using a ball screen to get primarily whoever he wants to guard him. And it's not necessarily just to run it. They're running it to they're picking on a guy.
Right.
They're finding Steph Curry and saying, go screen with whoever Steph's guarding, go screen for LeBron.
Right.
Or whatever. And we're talking elite of the world. So you get people with the perception that you got to be coaching a ball screen or you're not coaching. I mean, it's the main emphasis of what you guys kind of do. You teach other things, I know, but how long does it take for the kids to start understanding the ball handling reads and the roll at the hard hedge? I mean, I can think of just real quickly 7 ways to defend a ball screen. I mean, I'm sure there's, more than that probably, but how long for a kid to feel comfortable?
That's a great question. It's going to take, basketball is a post-puberty sport. And so a player is not going to fully develop physically and mentally, until they're, the peak of an athlete, a male athlete. I'm not a sport performance coach, but I would say maybe around 26, 27, 28. And so it's going to take that amount of time. But at the youth level, we need to introduce the concept, and the teaching of the pick and roll is always coverage dependent, meaning that at the point of the screen, if that coverage is aggressive, we have to have a solution for that coverage. If the coverage is conservative, maybe it's a drop, a deep drop, or just a soft show, then we have to have a solution for that coverage. And so when we're working with our players, teaching the pick and roll is always coverage dependent. And then understanding that, and this is something that Ross McMains has said, we never want to be prisoner of the coverage. So a lot of times, youth teams, and this is how I would do it, I would hard hedge or blitz ball screens. And then the team becomes a prisoner of that coverage because they don't know how to attack it. Usually they try to split the screen and attack it with a dribble, whereas we need to attack aggressive coverage with the pass. And so when we're breaking down all of our pick and roll, it's always coverage dependent. And then I like to start teaching the pick and roll first against a conservative coverage. So whether that's against a drop, whether that's against flat or under coverage, we're teaching those reads, and then we're randomizing those reads. So even before we get into teaching the pick and roll, Liam Flynn says a great thing, a great quote. He says, spacing before advantage, and then advantage before shot. So we're teaching the spacing template. Let's say we're in the mid pick and roll of the corners, and then the 45 having 4-point line spacing. We're teaching all of that. And then at the point of the screen, we're teaching the coverage solution 2-on-2. So we're breaking it down with a constraint, maybe 2 versus 1, to give positional advantage to the offensive player, because without offensive advantage, there can be no decision. And so we teach that with a positional advantage at first. That will lead to the decision making behind the screen, or the pass ahead, or the throwback. And then now they're starting to understand the reads. And then we move into more aggressive coverage, whether that is a hard hedge or a blitz or ice. We're teaching those coverage dependent solutions. So because of so many coverages and so many solutions, it does take quite a bit of time. But we randomize our decision making 2 at a time, 1 aggressive, 1 conservative, just to enable players to make decisions at the point of the screen.
So if you were here in California with a 35-second shot clock, would you be a ball screen coach, or would you be more traditional like we are here in the United States, where you're maybe running it here or there as a set, or late in the shot clock, or end of quarters, and because you're just doing it for your best player, you're not doing it it's the European continuity is really prevalent in the college game, and you see it in the NBA a little bit too, the continuity. But high school, you don't really see it. And I think, me personally, I think it's because either we're not really good at teaching it, or we feel we don't have enough guys that can make the reads and the decisions.
That's a great question. And not to bash any coaches who want to play or choose their style of play. I kind of boil it down to philosophy, being comfortable with our style of play. We do want to play with pace, but sometimes it doesn't mean that we want to play fast. So, I mean, we're always focused on first state, last state of the shot clock. But I just want to throw out some statistics for you on why we like to play fast, and then why we try to trigger offense with a pick and roll, or even with our two-side transition. So in the league last year, the best point per possession in transition was 1.26. The worst point per possession in transition was 1.14. Now, the best point possession in the half court offense was 1.16. So the worst point per possession in half court offense was 1.09. And so even the worst point per possession in transition was still better, or almost as good as the best point per possession in half court offense. And so we have the philosophy of you're never more open than when you first catch the ball, and then really teaching first touch decisions, either to drive it, shoot it, move it, or playing with 0 seconds on the catch. And then seeking positional advantage through attacking those long closeouts as early as we can in the shot clock. And then we're teaching them what a good shot is. And then for us, if it's the first hit ahead in transition, and that on that catch, that defender, we call it a bubble. If their bubble's big, which is more than arm's length distance to the catch, then we want them to shoot that, because we've drilled it. We've given them the decision making on how and why to shoot that shot, because we want to play with that pace. And so I don't think I would be a slow it down, run your continuity. We would play with pace. We would give players the opportunity to make basketball decisions. And really the only time that I play call is on a dead ball. And so sometimes, we're in transition. Players are making decisions. We're playing off of concepts. And then when there comes a dead ball, then I might call something that gets us a shot for our best player coming off of a pin down, or getting the ball to our best creator off of a get or off a pick and roll.
So as a youth coach, are you just trying to blow up ball screens, or do you defend in multiple ways, or you kind of have a set base? Like if it's middle, you trap it. If it's wing, you ice it. Or how do you?
So I want to go back to one more thing about just pace of play. I totally forgot. Going back to those statistics, even in the league, the early clock shooting percentage, field goal percentage was 53% in an early clock. In a short clock situation, the shooting percentage was 37.5. And so that just kind of shows, I mean, if you want to look at statistics or analytics, yep, why we want to play with that pace as opposed to, slowing it down and playing more continuity. For the next question, when we're working with defending ball screens at the youth level, there's two ways that I would defend it. The first way is aggressively with either a blitz or a hard hedge. And the reason why is because a lot of times coaches don't understand that anytime that there's 2 on the ball, it leaves a 4-on-3 offensive advantage behind the ball. And so teaching players, or having the opposing team not knowing how to invite that pressure and then kill the coverage with an advanced pass, or hitting the pocket with a short roll by the screener, it's hard for teams who don't really know how to attack a hard hedge to understand that. And so we would definitely teach a blitz or a hard hedge. And then also we'll work on it in practice, because it's going to stimulate better decisions by our players. And when we're trying to develop our players, because if there's a little bit more chaos and the coverages are a little bit more aggressive, decisions have to happen quicker in 0 seconds, and it just makes a more complete player. The second way that I would guard pick and roll against a youth team is I would force weak hand. And this is something that we have done in the past is we have locked left. We forced everything to the weak hand. We didn't give up, we didn't give up the left hand straight line drive. We wanted to control that first dribble, that just like we want to control the first dribble on every closeout. But we felt that as a youth player, their development on the left hand would be less. And so we experimented with all pick and rolls on the right side or on the right 45 would be a hard hedge. So we would push, we would jump the hip and we'd push the ball handler into the screen. And then on the left 45, because we are a lock left, we work to ice the screen. So we're trying to push that ball, down the sideline, down to the short corner, just because we didn't want that ball to get back to the right hand of the creator. So those are some things that we were experimented with. It was very difficult in any way to defend a middle pick and roll weak hand, just because, the screener's defender has to arrive on the right side of the screener up to touch. So those concepts were hard for our players to understand and then to create habits out of it. But I do think it's worth exploring for youth teams, those two ways on how to defend the pick and roll.
Okay, and then you would maybe just make adjustments out of timeouts or end of game situations?
Right, so short clock situations, we're going to aggressively switch. And then we unfortunately didn't have a lot of time in our window to go over multiple ways on how to defend the screen. And so we did switch a lot just because we have a lot of like-sized defenders. But even though they're like size doesn't mean that they're like skill level defensively. And so sometimes you can get in trouble defensively when you're switching ball screens just because we feel that they're like size, we can switch it, but it doesn't necessarily mean they may be not like or like skill wise defensively. So sometimes we had bad mismatch or bad matchups defensively when we did switch.
I like your strategy because there's not too many Draymond Greens in the high school level to do the short rolls and then throw the lob to another guy. I mean, when you're watching the elite NBA teams run it, they have usually a pretty good guy that can short roll and then go make a play.
Right. But, on the flip side of that, I really do believe that as coaches, we can develop those short roll reads, and we just place constraints. We place constraints on those reads to where kind of give the offense that advantage. For instance, I said it before, but if there is no offensive advantage, there is no decision. So given positional advantage on a short roll so that they can read the tag or the rotating help defender so that they can kick it out. But yeah, that is definitely a skill that is tough to teach, and definitely a skill that's for players to be a great short roll decision maker. It is challenging.
Is there any NBA coaches that you study?
I had a coach last night reach out to me. He's like, I know you don't watch NBA that much. I know you watch more European. Greg Popovich is just, is really the way he plays, the way he gets the ball moving, the way he has player movement. I like that. And I study some of the Houston Rockets transition and then the Milwaukee Bucks as well. They're more 5 out. And I have ran 5 out in the past. So I have watched those, but not as much as I have with European clubs.
And then before we switch gears to your transition stuff, name a couple teams that maybe if we have access to film study that we should be watching from overseas.
Well, I'm always partial to Liam Flynn's team, Hopia Jerusalem. Studied a lot of them. Fenerbahce is another a great team to watch in the EuroLeague. One of my lecturers with the FECC was Pablo Lasso. So that was Luka Doncic's coach with Real Madrid. So, those are 3 teams that I love. I'm always going to get something out of those teams. And then in our FIBA window, we play New Zealand. So Ross McBain has some really great offensive concepts that New Zealand runs. Very simple with his dominoes concepts, with his guard-to-guard zooms, with his gets. A couple of decisions or constraints or principles that he puts into play. I just like their style of play. So those are a couple of teams that I do like to watch and just try to learn from.
One last question before we switch over to transition stuff. What's your favorite action before a ball screen? Is it DHO, down Chicago, Spain? What's your favorite action with ball screens?
Lately, it has been the mash. So we're going to screen somebody into a ball screen, or we're going to DHO somebody into a ball screen. So I really like that concept because it's really difficult. We try to get teams to guard 3 or 4 different actions in just one possession. But when you combine concepts like a DHO into a pick and roll, or a short route pin down into a pick and roll, it's really tough for teams to guard those 2 actions right in a row. So those are the things that to get into a mid pick and roll or into a shake, those are some of the concepts that I like to screen into a pick and roll. Sometimes, it's just stimulating some thoughts. Sometimes we're going to miss a pick and roll on purpose to get into a better angle of a pick and roll. So there's a concept called a bait and twist. So we're going to bait that defender to go under the screen, and then we're going to twist that screen. And now we have a better slicing angle, get off the screen that, gives more separation from the creator and the on-ball defender. And then so, when you go under that screen, that gives a shot decision. But, once we twist that ball screen, that on-ball defender gets mashed right into the chest of the screener. So that's another concept that, I like. I haven't experimented with that yet because we haven't been on the court for about 5 months with our youth. So those are some of the concepts that I do like.
Good stuff, Coach. So who has influenced you dub it as a 2-sided transition break. So you're going to be doing a clinic with us with System Basketball in September on it. But 2-sided meaning that you kind of get into a 5-out.
So the 2-side can go, you can have a rim runner in a 2-side, or basically, you do get into a 5-out spacing template. But it's really, we're just, whether that 2 sides, ball side, or that 2 sides, weak side, we're just trying, first of all, to sprint. We want our corners to sprint their lane to get to the corner and is, rim level on the corner. So we say sprint and hug. So we want to stay as wide as we can on the sideline. Then we want to sprint and hug the corner. Anytime that there's a 2-side, we'll have that corner filled first priority. And then the next priority is that 45, which is free throw lane extended, but we say delay and hug. So we want to create stretch spacing between the 45 and the corner, so that when the ball does go early and opposite from one side to the other side, then typically, and the reason why the 2-side so effective is it goes counter what transition defense is trying to accomplish. They're trying to stop the ball, establish ball side, and then plug the hit ahead ball side, and then they're all loading up the middle third. So we understand this on the 2 sides. So we try to move that defensive rotation twice. So if you just imagine the ball being outletted to the right sideline, that's the first way we move defense. So now defense has established ball side, which is great. That's what they want to do. Now we go opposite side. We call it early and opposite. That moves the defense twice, which is really difficult for them to defend in transition. And usually because they're loading up ball side, there tends to be 1 defender guarding 2 on the 2 side. So now when we go early and opposite, we have either a lone closeout where we can attack the closeout, drive the 45, or we have the opportunity to make a 1 more to the corner and hopefully for a catch and shoot 3. So with our style of play on the under 17s, when we were in New Caledonia for the under 17 Oceania Championships, our tallest guy was 6'3". And so we had to find some type of advantage, and we felt that playing in the 2-side in transition was the best way to create these long closeouts early in transition. So that's really the biggest reason why we chose the 2-side. And then from there, I haven't moved because I feel like it helps players play unscripted. And I don't ever want to handicap a player in transition. A lot of coaches in transition, they want their primary and secondary break run to perfection because it makes them feel and look good. but then they determine where the pass goes and they determine where the dribble goes. That's just not the flow of the game. So I want to empower players to make, play unscripted and to make basketball decisions in transition. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I feel like the best way we can develop players is to play in the unscripted style of play with a two-sided transition.
Well, you talked about some points per possessions on the first 8 and the last 8. Do you happen to know what they are in the middle third? From like 9 to
the shot clock.
Yeah.
I don't have those. I would assume that it's right in between the two field goal percentages and then points per game. But you have to think about, and something to stimulate some thought, that when let's just say we first come down the court in transition, if a team doesn't transition well, they're not communicating in transition, scoring on the first offensive action or getting an offensive action like a get with the trail guy or a drag screen could be all that we need to gain that advantage. And so once we get into the middle of the shot clock, defense has already established their 5-on-5, maybe have gotten a neutral advantage. And so now we have to hunt for how to gain an offensive advantage. And so we need a trigger. Usually that first trigger, like a ball screen get or a DHO, defense is ready to defend that. And so that's the middle of the shot clock. As we get towards the end of the shot clock, if they have to defend a short route pin down into a mid pick and roll, the ball goes to the second side with our big, and they have to defend a dribble handoff into another mid pick and roll. That's 4 different actions in the now it's short clock situation that the defense has to guard. Now they have to defend those actions, they have to communicate through those actions. And so, that's why we're either trying to focus on the first 8 or through the last 8.
Good stuff. So who's some of the same coaches you've mentioned? Are they your influences of the two-sided transition break?
There's not a lot of, other than through Chris Oliver, there's not a lot of information on the two side. But some of the teams that I've watched, he coached the Canada Jones Cup team in 2019. You're watching film on his teams. 2019, I'm not for sure if Army does it this past season, but Army has done it previously. Sometimes New Zealand's women's coach, Guy Malloy, has run some of the two side. Who else have I watched on the two side? Milwaukee has done some, and then obviously Houston has done some. So those are some of the teams that I've watched, and then just trying to just be creative in my own thinking on what we can call certain actions, and then just stimulate my own thought through watching how other teams execute in this style of play.
System basketball teams don't care. Like on a miss, they don't care what lanes guys run, especially Grinnell. I don't know if you ever studied them. They have a preferred shooting method. So if 3 guys go down one line, that's okay with them, and they can have those 2 guys just do a staggered to bring them off the screens. They don't care about running lanes. They just care about getting down the floor to get a quick shot. So it's quite interesting because I'm leaning towards running system and probably running system this next year.
Just to go off that, we like the two side because it's a really good spacing template, and so. We say space before advantage before a shot. So, we could tell, philosophically, I could tell players just to get up the court, but if we have an intelligent spacing template, we're unscripted in it. So we just want to fill corners first and then the 45. But we do have specific lanes that we want players to fill. And then if there's a 3 side, if there's 3 players on one side, then we're going to cut that 45 or cut the person in the middle. And so just like your system, we want to keep the middle third open, but something to help maybe stimulate some thinking is if we do have a spacing template, then that can get us into, solutions for if we don't have advantage in transition. I know you said that you would have a double staggered for the player in the corner. That would be an example of a solution for maybe a 3 side. So I haven't studied the system. I've listened to a couple of podcasts on it. And it is very intriguing to me, but I think what's really good about both is players can play within it, unscripted.
Yeah. Whole concept is get your shots up within 12 seconds. So you're just they don't necessarily think quality. They want quantity over quality and get lots of possessions. So real quick on that, a little bit more on the two-sided. So the side that is not two-sided, he runs to the dead corner?
Well, he can delay the 45 or he can hit the dead corner. So we never want to give the ball to the corner, whether it's on a two-side or a single side, unless he's able to catch and shoot. Okay. And so we never want to get the ball dead there. So we prefer the ball in the cross half court by air. And so we want our point guard to be ball movers early, preferably by air. And then we're trying to get the ball to the three-point line by 20 seconds on the shot clock. So whether that's with a hit ahead or with a dribble push by the point guard, that's, maybe similar to the system. That's how quickly we're trying to get the ball up the court.
Okay. Got a couple more questions for you. What is your goals for your future in the coaching profession? Where do you want to take this? You want to be the head coach of the national team of Guam, or a FIBA team? What do you want, Coach?
I think being ambitious is, you have to, I read something yesterday that said, I don't know where I'm going, but I know how to get there. And the purpose of that quote was, I don't know where the coaching profession is going to take me, but I do know how to get there through work ethic, through just doing things the right way. Being where your feet at is huge with me and my family. So being content with where we're at, not necessarily I'm not looking to climb a ladder, but, just being where my feet at, being intentional with my relationships where I'm at. We have a great federation with the Guam Basketball Federation. We have a great president. He's also our head men's coach, doing a phenomenal job with our men's team. We, under his influence, we went from unranked in the FIBA world to ranked 73rd. And so, success is no coincidence there. And then, I don't know where it would take me, but I am in the Basketball Australia Emerging Coach Initiative. So that's the top 25 coaches, 35 and under. And I'm excited about learning through that. And wherever the profession takes, I'm always open to those. But just being where my feet are and working hard where I'm at in the position that I'm at, I think that would be success for me. And then when that next opportunity comes, preparation with opportunity will equal that success. So continue preparing where my feet are at right now, I think is the best thing for me and my family in the coaching profession.
Any advice for coaches that may want to become a FIBA coach, or how they would go about that, or advice? I mean, you did it, you went overseas, you found a way. Any advice for us?
I think the biggest thing is just having a growth mindset. And going back to Carol Dweck's book, having that mindset of knowing that I can continually grow my mind, I can continually grow my philosophy, and understanding that even though, for instance, I'm coaching internationally, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. And, applying the concept of being where your feet are at, just trying to grow where you're at in your position, is something that I think is very important. But then I think the second thing to go with that is not only with that growth mindset, but be a sponge. And I'll be the first to say, I don't know everything. I know that I know less now than I think I knew a couple of years ago, and just always trying to learn and grow, and just not be satisfied with what I do know, but also know that when I am learning, it's not just for me, it's for the players that I get to coach. And when we become great teachers, and when I've heard the quote, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. I do agree with that, but I think we do need to know more than just caring for athletes. We need to know how to tactically teach. We need to know how to teach decision making. We need to have personal power with our players as opposed to positional power. And yes, they need to know how much we care, but we also have to continually growing professionally ourselves. And that comes through just studying, through talking to other coaches, and just trying to learn daily.
Awesome, Coach. Before we sign off for the night, anybody wants to learn more about what you do, I know you have some material out there. How can they find that?
My Twitter handle is @CoachBTipton. My email is coachbtipton@gmail.com. And you can always reach out to me. Coach 2 was gracious enough to publish my webinar on the creating an advantage with the mid-pick and roll. I have a promo code for that. If you want it for free, I don't worry about making money. They put a price on the video publication, and to me, that's not my agenda to make money. My agenda is just to share. So reach out to me. I can give you that promo code. And then coming up in the future, I am doing a session with you on the two-sided transition at the end of the month. I'm working with the Singapore Basketball Federation, talking transition offense and transition defense. And then I'll be publishing those webinars as well. And then another webinar I'll be able to publish is team defense, controlling penetration to avoid defense, something that I talked about previously. So I'm always willing to share those links or those publications for free. Just reach out to me and I'd be happy to share those.
I can help you out if you wanted to with my email list to the group when I email out the link to tonight's podcast, if you'd like me to do that as well.
Yeah,
so I just want to thank you. You're one of the guys that has grown the game. Tremendous. Found you on Twitter. We reached out, we talked and made a connection. I just think we're turning a negative situation in the world into a positive. I think basketball coaches have become more sharing. We used to be the most secretive guys in the world and not share. And this stuff has helped us get over our missing basketball, the fix that we don't have. Last one for you. I know you're not really an NBA guy, but who you got winning in the bubble?
Toronto Raptors.
Toronto Raptors.
You look at Nick Nurse and what he's doing and their style of play. I always root for that underdog. They lost Kawhi Leonard, and I've met a lot of coaching friends from Canada the last 5 months, and I've done I've talked to 3 different universities on these topics with their coaching staffs, and I'm saying that Canada basketball is one of the top in the world of how they teach the game. And so, I really like just their style of play and how they approach it. So, I'm a big fan of Canadian basketball and definitely the Toronto Raptors.
Big coach there that hardly anyone knows who he is Dave Smart.
Yes, Dave Smart. Yes.
Yeah. So small world that you mentioned that. That's where my wife's from. So
right on.
She's just outside of Toronto. So
beautiful.
She hears you picking the Raptors. She's loving it. So
we're best friends for life now. Nice.
Well, I want to thank you again, Coach, for your time and all you're doing, and would like to wish you safe health to your family and to your team and everything, and good luck. And we'll see you again in September.
Thank you, Coach. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for sharing the game as well. We appreciate that.
All right. Appreciate you. Thanks. Have a great night.
Thank you.